let's go back to live mode. Okay, go to studio mode. Turned off. Sweet. Okay, so the 5 tiers, we've got God tier, like great tier. I feel like it's vague, but mediocre, bad, and unplayable. This is more of a traditional good or bad tier list, and that makes more sense to me for cards. Excuse me. So yeah, I feel like the 5 tiers makes more sense, and that the reasoning behind that. Sorry, the 5 tiers of just quality make more sense for cards because unlike relics, which can have minor benefits that you don't have to play around. So you know something that will, for example, I gave Blood Vial a minor benefit tier, which is like you wouldn't really choose to pick it, but if you get it, you're like, oh okay, this is fine. It's not actively neutral or worse. It is there's a marginal benefit to gaining 2 health at the start of every fight. It is very marginal, but it is still better than nothing. Equally, I was looking at another example. The strawberry again gives you a bit more max health, minor benefit, but you'd rather get some like high impact relic, like a tea set or Juzu beads or whatever. You'd much rather get something like that. So with the cards, that's not so much the case because in order to use a card, you have to reliably draw it, and it has to have an impact the turn you draw it. That's the metric by which I'll be rating these. I haven't actually gone through and pre-rated these. Obviously, I know what all the cards are. It's not like a new set or something. It's not like a Hearthstone expansion or something like that. But I just wanted to go through it because I want a place where I can just go, this is my opinion on those cards. I can obviously, if people ask me live and on chat, I'm happy to answer them. I'm not going to be sort of like, go look at my video, give me views, subscribe, follow, all that shit. Not my intention. I purely want a little baby compendium that I can just say, if you want to see what all of my opinions are, there you go. But I think this about that card. So you might notice that there'll be a band of cards in the top tier. Excuse me. There'll be a band of cards in the top tier, or the God tier. There'll be some that float around the great and mediocre tier. I know it sort of jumps from great to mediocre. That's because there are very few cards. This is purely from speedrunning perspective. Very few cards that fit that sort of like, oh, it's good, I guess. It's either going to be great, pretty good, or bad, or like really average or bad. There's just you'll notice that there'll be a lot of cards for speedrunning purposes that are just lumped into bad or unplayable, with the only discerning difference being that there'll be some minor useful element of a card that goes into bad, because although you'll never pick it, I do want there to be a definition between, say, a 4 and a 5, because, excuse me, there'll be things like Astrolabe, where you roll into 3 cards, and 2 of them you're like, oh, those suck, but which one should I get rid of first? Obviously, there'll be context behind it, so regardless of my opinion here, there will be times where card A is better than card B, despite me rating them the opposite way. So this is contextually from the perspective that you want. You're running a Whirlwind build, you're trying to Whirlwind Flex Strength build, that's what you're aiming for, and the cards that can synergize with that. And I'll try and give a brief metric of why I've rated what I've rated, why I've rated something the way I've rated it. But I don't want to dwell on cards too much when they don't need context. Quite simply, they just, a lot of cards won't need the additional context. They'll just need to sort of point out it's bad because this, it's amazing because this. You already know why Whirlwind is amazing. I don't need to give it a 5-minute soliloquy of just me talking and saying Whirlwind. So let me just close Spotify down as well because we're not going to be using that. I want this music-free recording because I think it'll just be easier. I can feel myself already losing my voice before I've even started, which is phenomenal, obviously. I will start right away with the basic cards. And you guys should be able to all see this on screen. Let me know if there's any issues with what you're seeing, so you can't see the cards that I'm talking about. For context as well, those of you who are watching this live or watching it on YouTube, the way that the wiki does this, and thank you to the wiki for having this resource because I'm just going to have it up on screen the whole time. So thank you the saythisbio.wikia.com. I'll put a link in the description on thingy, on YouTube, but for Twitch you guys can find it by just googling Say This Bio Wiki. There are 2 of them. There's the Gamepedia one and there's the Wikia one. I'm using the Wikia one. they're both like being worked on actively, and they're both pretty functional. So I've just picked this one because I googled it and it was the first one that came up. So starting with the basic cards that you get, you've got Bash, Defend, and Strike. Everyone knows what these cards are. They are the cards you literally start the game with the Ironclad. The other classes have Defend and Strike as well, but they have slightly different things. And I'm going to be reviewing the Ironclad cards because I feel like that's long overdue. Hey, Celeste. And I will also be reviewing the defect cards because I've had a bit of experience with them. They're still changing, so they'll be less concrete, and my opinions on them might not be accurate if cards get changed or if they get removed or other things get added that just supersede them or make them worse. I don't know. The defect cards are going to be less concrete, but I'm still going to give my view on them. I'm also going to be trying to focus less on Twitch stuff. I'm pure, like, as in just for this video, for this stream, for the. I imagine this will probably take. I know there's a lot of cards. I imagine this could take a couple of hours to go through 2 sets of cards. So be like settle in if you are going to be here. Afterwards, I'll probably do a couple of speedruns or a few speedruns and then jump into Deadfire and grab dinner somewhere in the middle of that. But until we do that, I'm going to just get through all of these. Oh, and we're going to do the potions as well. Please remind me, those of you that do sit through all of this, like AJB, you were asking about that. I do want to go over the potions. Specifically the new ones they've added, but obviously I'll cover all of them. I believe there's information on it on the wiki. So we'll go through all that. But starting right here, we have Bash, Defend, and Strike. So Defend, the just almost entirely pointless card for speedrunning, because ideally in the best of speedruns you kill all enemies within turn 1. If not over 2 or 3 turns. Very few fights should take more than that. Obviously, some of the early fights will take more than 1 turn, simply because they are early fights and you haven't got the cards or the ability to kill them in 1 turn. It just doesn't exist. It is physically impossible to, get a 1 turn kill on the first fight in the game. But for context here, yeah, you have these 3 cards. Defend, entirely useless for speedrunning. It's the first card you should be getting rid of, with very few exceptions. It doesn't get a 5. It'll get like a 4.5 on the scale, 4.9 even, simply because it can clutch keep you alive, and you have to have them in your deck, so you do experience them. You can't get around that. If you could start the game and it said start with 0 defense, I would probably do it 100% of the time, because maybe not in Ascension 15 or something, but that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about speedrunning, and for speedrunning, Defend is just useless practically. So I give it a 4.9. Strike is like a 4. Again, it does damage, and therefore it doesn't suck. But it's just, there are so many attacks out there that are better than it, for speedrunning and not for speedrunning. It does obviously have the synergy with Perfected Strike, but Perfected Strike just isn't really reliable enough. It can be good early, and I'll get into that when we get to Perfected Strike. But for all intents and purposes, it is not very good. Bash, meanwhile... So Bash... I find it hard to rate Bash as well, because it is pretty mediocre, but it applies Vulnerable, which is one of the most important things that it can do, or that a card can do when you're speedrunning. So I'd give it like a 2.5. I said there wouldn't be many, but it does fit that gap of it being good. But as soon as you can do what it does with another card that costs less, you get rid of it. If you have no more defends or strikes to get rid of. So Bash applying Vulnerable is great, but as soon as you get a Bag of Marbles or a Thunderclap or a Trip or something that does what it does but doesn't cost 2 energy, it probably won't see play anymore as soon as you get that tool that replaces it or supersedes it. So excuse me, Bash is just, I think it's very bad later on, but at the start of a speedrun it'll help you out a significant amount. So I'd say, yeah, like 2.5, right in the middle, kind of the metric by which you can see if a card is good or bad for speedrunning. And generally, I'll give it like a slightly more general overview, but in the guise of speedrunning, or in the like under the microscope of speedrunning. So those are the basic cards, the cards you start with. Bash is slightly unique in that you can't You can't, I believe, buy it from a shop, and you can't get it offered as a card reward because it is a starter card, not a common card. That being said, you can get it in a couple of things like the Gremlin Pick 2, the card event. And there's a couple of other places where you can get it. It's a bit of a weird card as context, but I would rarely pick up, if ever, try and pick up more than one of it. Okay, so Anger. It's a 0-cost card that deals damage. That's fine. It deals 5 damage or 7 damage when upgraded, but when you play it, you add another copy of it to your discard pile. So you end up putting loads of Anger in the deck, and that's what it becomes. I think Anger's actually not that bad. I think Anger early on in the speedrun, and this is sort of like, there does need to be the comparison of Pandora's Box versus no Pandora's Box glitch. If you're using the Pandora's Box glitch, where you clear all your cards from the deck, it loses a lot of its value because you start drawing loads of them and losing out on your good draws. But it is 0-cost deal damage, which is why it and Clash can be particularly functional. However, for speedrunning, looking at the absolute top tier of it would be Pandora's Boxing away all your cards, or Peace Piping away all your cards, or Eventing away all your cards. And that way I would say Anger falls under like the very mediocre tier. I wouldn't be pissed off if it ended up in my deck for whatever reason, through a transform, but I would never spend money on it in the shop. It's not bad, it's just not great. It's like having it's better than Strike, put it like that, and Strike falls under bad tier. So I'd put it like a 3, because it does damage, and that's what a lot of reviews are going to come down to. Does it deal damage? Yes, therefore it doesn't suck, but it's mediocre at best. Armaments, Searing Blow's best friend. Again, it doesn't really do anything. The one saving grace of Armaments I'd give is that it upgrades other cards, and when you if you just choose to get one Armaments, how fast is Anger only plus top? Not very fast because the animation takes forever. It would obviously get you 1-turn kills, but it wouldn't be good for speedrunning. It just wouldn't, Moritz. So, you would win, but it would be a miserable experience of just drawing in tons of Angers, even if the deck is doubling each time you play, because obviously it shuffles 2 copies of it and then 4 copies and 8 copies. It would still take forever compared to Whirlwind, which does all that, hits everyone, and does it off 1 card play. So yeah, not very good at all for speedrunning. But again, an early one that you randomly pick up through a transform, you would still remove Defends over it. I think you'd remove Defends over most cards, but there are some cards that you should remove before Defends, which again I'll explain when they come up. So Armaments, again, transforming into it isn't terrible because it can upgrade your attacks, and that way, if you haven't had the chance to upgrade your strikes, you play that and then you play 2 strikes. Versus playing 3 strikes, it does the same amount of damage, assuming the strikes weren't upgraded already, and gives you a bit of block. So it's not terrible, but again, it doesn't deal damage on its own. You have to have the attacks in hand. They have to not be upgraded, and so on and so forth. I put it like a 3.5 because it's one of the better defensive cards. And if you for some reason really need defensive cards, well, your speedrun's probably going pretty poorly, but if it's not, you probably shouldn't take Armaments. Just again, if you transform into it, that's going to be a lot of the viewpoints are as well, is that if you transform into it, or if you're doing some sort of race through a random seed against someone else, you could make a case for picking up Armaments and again a Searing Blow or whatever, and going for that kind of style deck. But again, in terms of purely just running the game as fast as possible and being able to reset the game, you wouldn't take Armaments. You would just get your Whirlwind and go. So yeah, Armaments 3.5. Body Slam, I mean, you can make a case for it dealing some damage early on in a speedrun. You can make it cost 0, that's nice. 0 damage spells are always good. But you're going to be removing your blocks, and it immediately loses any value at that point, besides having strength, which, that's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous thing to do. So for speedrunning, Body Slam hits like a 4. 4.5, 4, maybe even a 5. It's practically unplayable in a normal speedrun. There would be some special circumstances where you get a defense-heavy deck with 5 Body Slams, and you upgrade them all and play all these defense, and you get Unceasing Top, and then you just go bam, bam, bam with your Body Slams. But in reality, not going to happen. Not going to be functional. Yeah, I'm actually willing to put it on 5. Clash, I take Clash quite a lot. Clash is pretty good. it's a 0 cost deal damage, and it deals a significant chunk of damage, unlike Anger. Anger does 5 or 7, this does 14 or 18, and that's not factoring in any strength you might have gained. So I'd peg Clash at a... It's not a God tier card, because it doesn't achieve the same desired results as a Whirlwind deck, a Whirlwind setup does, and it can't be played when you have Offerings in hand, or... what are they called? The... Battle Trance. You can't play it when Battle Trance is in hand. You can't play it with Flexes in hand, but you would probably play all the Flexes anyway. But there are some times where you just want to deal some damage, and you've drawn like 3 Flexes, and you need to deal like 1 point of damage. So you have to play them all out before you play Clash, or you get 1 wound in your deck from a boss or whatever, and it sucks because you can't play it. That being said, it's a really good card. I'd put it in 2. It's a great tier card, pretty reliable. Sorry, no, not always reliable, but when it hits hard and can give you extra burst on bosses. Splitting an ooze at a much lower value because you just happen to have a Clash, and that's amazing. It can get you out of really sticky situations. Cleave. So again, from the context of running, normally I wouldn't take it regularly. Maybe very, very early on in a run, I would grab a Cleave if I needed the AOE against an ooze fight or a gremlin fight. It has its context. It's baby Whirlwind, right? So Cleave can never be terrible. I would put it, however, somewhere between great and mediocre. So I'd probably peg it around the a 2.5 mark. It just doesn't have the breadth to do stuff, and it does actually 8 to 11. It has been buffed, I believe. The 7 to 10 is an old image, but it and 8 to 11 is obviously more damage than Whirlwind. Unupgraded to upgraded, it just does more damage for the money you pay. But you'd obviously have to play, if you had 5 of them in hand, you'd have to play each one and wait for the animation to play. So it is worse than Whirlwind in that regard. That's why Whirlwind is so desired. Hits everything, you play 1 card, sorted. Dreamy. But Cleave's still pretty good. So maybe I'd give it like a 2, but a lower 2 than Clash. Maybe Clash is more like a 1.5, because I do still pick it up. So Cleave's maybe like a... No, Clash is 2, Cleave's like a 2.5. Because it still has functionality, but whatever, in the context of the fastest runs ever, you'd never pick it. But in the context of running a random seed, AoE is AoE. That's never a bad thing, especially because it does decent damage. So worth picking up maybe, but just sort of on the line of not really being playable in a normal race. In a normal speed run. Clothesline, again, better burst than Bash. Expensive for the damage it deals, though. It's 6 damage per energy. It does apply weak, and when it gets upgraded, it deals 14 damage and applies 3 weak. So it's not terrible in that regard. The weak can save you sometimes, and obviously if someone's vulnerable, just whacking them with a big hit is great. But in a speedrun, you wouldn't take this. In a resettable speedrun, you'd never take this. If you're not able to reset again, Clothesline, it's okay, but it's more like a 3. It's very mediocre. Doesn't do as much burst as you want. It doesn't scale well with strength. Things that scale well with strength are things that hit multiple times. Whirlwind scales well with strength and energy. Pummel, those kind of ones. Sword Boomerang, they all scale pretty reasonably. Heavy Blade does as well, but we don't pick Heavy Blade. We don't have Heavy Blade in the card pool, but we're still going to review it because it's a good card. Flex, it's a 1. Flex is a 1. Flex is fantastic. It's the bread and butter of all Ironclad speedruns, quite simply. It makes Whirlwind as good as it does, or as good as it is. It makes all strength cards good. And in order for it to be bad, you'd have had to draw loads of Flexes and no attacks. Unlike, for example, Seeing Red, or Flex is phenomenal picker, yeah. So Flex is crazy. Without it, you can't really have a competitive deck. Unfortunately, it's that important. You can gain strength in other ways, but not as quickly or as reliably as Flex. Especially in a small enough deck, it would revolve around playing as many Flexes as possible or any strength gain, but Flex is that way. And then hitting Whirlwind and just nuking everything. Going nuclear with it. So Flex, yeah, 1. Don't think I need to explain that one more. It gains you strength. That's what the core of the speedrunning deck is. Even the comparison I was about to make is Flex versus Seeing Red, right? If you have Whirlwind and you draw Seeing Red and you don't have Ice Cream, so you have to draw them on the same turn. You play Seeing Red and you play Whirlwind versus playing Flex and playing Whirlwind. If you have, obviously it depends if you combine the two. Yeah, it's good to balance them out. But if you draw Seeing Red and you don't draw Whirlwind and you don't have ways to spend that extra energy, it's useless. You have, say you draw Seeing Red and 4 attacks, and they're like, they cost a total of 3 energy, and your setup, and you already had 3 energy anyway. It does literally nothing besides eat up a card slot and get exhausted when you play it. Flex, meanwhile, is much less conditional, because if you get Flex and you have any attacks, anything that says deal X damage on the card, Flex will make it deal more damage. I don't think there's any cards that wouldn't do that. So it makes it just deal more damage, and that's phenomenal. Even if you have it with strikes, it's good. It's good. It makes the strikes more functional. So it's like the gel. It's the glue that holds all the deck together, and that's why it's so valuable. So Flex, yeah, 1. That's enough. Enough said. Havoc. Play the top card of your draw pile and exhaust it. It costs 1 or 0. This is terrible. This is a 5. The risk that you take by drawing a card and randomly playing it and then exhausting it. Fuck no. You do that with your Whirlwind in a fight where you need your Whirlwind. Yeah, you play the Whirlwind, but it's also at 1 cost less because you've spent 1 energy, or maybe 0 if you've upgraded this for some insane reason. And then you've exhausted it until the end of the fight, until the next fight. I would rather have a thing that just says draw a card, and then I draw the card and I see what it is and go, yes, I want to play that, boom. This is awful. It doesn't gain you armor. It's rubbish. It's terrible. It's like a 5 point, it's a 6. It's that bad. It's one of the worst cards in the game. Even at 0 mana, 0 energy. I'm going to call it mana occasionally, sorry. But it is terrible. It is really bad. Headbutt. Deal 9 or 12 damage when upgraded. Place a card from your discard pile on the top of your draw pile. In fact, I could probably be doing this in game, couldn't I? I could probably be doing this with the game window open, because all the cards are on there and we can flick through the upgraded ones. Maybe I'll do that, actually. Now that I'm like a few things in, why not make everything really awkward and switch to a setup where I can just look at all the cards on in-game. Yeah, let's be really awkward and do that. Oh, I might not have seen them all, actually. That's a really good point, me. Because, I mean, this setup's fine, but it's just... I mean, if we put the game up, it probably would just look better, wouldn't it? So we'll do that instead. Or we'll try it out and see how it looks. There's an update queued. Interesting. Updating PUBG. Gonna probably drop some frames here, apologies. And then it's updating Spire. It's taking its time. So yeah, just ignore the dropping frames. Ignore the quick break we're gonna take here of say like a minute whilst it loads up. Or it's downloading. Excuse me. But yeah, we're just going through the cards. Headbutt is not a bad card here. You know, deal 9 or 12 damage. Place a card from your discard pile on top of your draw pile. So Headbutt damage is fine. You know, 1 energy, deal 12 or 9. It's pretty reasonable. It's better than... yeah, it's because I'm downloading something right now. So apologies, those of you. You might just want to refresh in a sec. I do seem British because I am British. It's insane. It's quite a thing. When you come from the UK, you sound and you appear to be British. Yes, this is a thing that happens. So we're gonna open this up. It is the beta client that we're currently looking at. This could just be a much more functional way than looking at a browser. Just get to editor quickly. I know the thing's in front of it. Just give me a sec. I want to see what I can actually look at here. Card library. Card library. We've seen all the red cards. That's a good thing. Don't care about the other person. She is... There's one that we haven't seen? Fuck. What have we not seen? Alright, I think we will use this setup, I think, because it just looks prettier. So we'll... I'm going to hide the browser. Browser, go away. Going to move the tier list and the notepad. Oh, Jesus. How do I undo? move this over here. I'm shrinking everything down. God, they don't both shrink. It's painful. Oh God, I can't click on it. This is actually killing me inside a little bit. Some part of me somewhere is dying. Where are we? Cool, right, there we go. Thanks for your patience. Right, got the game set up here now. And this will have sound as well. Very minor game flicky sounds. But maybe this looks better. Am I in London? I'm based south of London. But I'm gonna, excuse me if I'm not too interactive with the chat, because I just want to get through this review. So it does actually have them all in order as well, which is fantastic. We can see them non-upgraded. We can see them upgraded. I'm going to forget what certain things do now when I don't see them upgraded. But we can actually bring it full screen, can't we? This works pretty well. I'm going to move myself slightly. There we go. Bump me over. Bump me over. Okay, so Headbutt is right in terms of the tier list, the rating. I'd put it pretty average. The damage it deals is good. The fact you can like pull a card back that you've just played and add it to your draw pile is decent. Issue being that decision time that you have to spend looking into it and going, okay, we want that card there. You know, we want to add the Flex back to the top of our deck. We want to add the Whirlwind to the back to the top of our deck. That can be really useful, but ideally in a speedrun world, you've reduced your deck down enough that doesn't matter. You're going to draw it next turn anyway, or you're going to hit an offering, which is going to hit you into it or another offering or whatever. So this is a slow way of doing what other cards do better. That being said, in a race or whatever, or a blind seed or whatever, where you're not guaranteed the Whirlwind, where you don't reset, this could be pretty reasonable. It's 12 damage for one cost when it's upgraded, and that's pretty good. That's pretty decent value. And it has an upside of sorts. So I can see it being reasonable. In terms of the actual tier list, though, I'd put it somewhere mediocre. It's 2.5 to 3, somewhere around there. Doesn't really achieve what you want when you're speedrunning effectively. Heavy Blade. So 2 costs, deal 14 damage. Strength affects Heavy Blade 3 or 5 times, depending on whether or not it's upgraded. Now, this is one of the cards that scales best with Strength. It scales 5 times across 2 mana. Or 3 times across 2 mana, 2 energy. Whirlwind scales per X energy is how it scales when you increase your strength. So this scales better than that, unless you have more than 5 energy, and this is still really good. So I would rate this really highly. The only reason, and I would put it like a 1.5, even a 1 maybe, because it is that good. But I still run without it in the I still run without this in the game. The reason being that I want to condense the card pool down as much as possible. It could be a mistake. I won't lie. I've thought about running a level 1 Ironclad, because when I speedrun, I play a level 0 Ironclad. This card isn't unlocked, and it, alongside Limit Break as well, which are pretty good cards. So I'm considering genuinely running at a level 1 Ironclad, and this is one of the things that you miss out on most. The one downside it has on Whirlwind is that this is not AoE. It is very good for clearing out enemies quickly when you have Flex in the deck. Otherwise, it's relatively inefficient. If you don't have any strength gain, it's 2 cost, deal 14 damage. That's barely better than a strike, and when you upgrade it, and you upgrade a strike is literally better per cost than Heavy Blade. But as soon as you start gaining strength, this gains incredible value. You have one Flex Plus with this, and you deal like 34 damage with it. That's nuts. That is crazy. And that's not factoring in any other strength gain, them being vulnerable, all these kind of things. So Heavy Blade is like a 1 to 1.5. It's right up the top of the tier, but I just don't run with it, and that could be a mistake. Like, genuinely, I'm not going to lie. I've considered many times adding it back in, and I may well do in the future. especially because the other cards you get a limit break, and which has potential to be insane, and spot weakness, which is not great, but it still gains strength, and it has tertiary value. We'll go through it when we see it. Iron Wave. This is actually really bad for speedrunning. The damage is mediocre anyway, so that's a big indicator. But and the block that it gains isn't particularly useful. And more importantly than that, it has a fucking slow animation. Like, the animation is really painfully slow. Therefore, you don't pick it. I would give it like a 4.5 because it does deal damage. I'd say 4.5 because it is detrimental, but it deals damage. So it's not the worst thing ever because it does deal damage. Cards that fit like solely into 5 are awful cards that don't deal damage on their own, and they suck. I have done AJ in the past, but it's not that simple. It's not as simple as saying trying one or the other, running with or without Heavy Blade Limit Break is better or worse. By feel, it doesn't really work that way. It's more of a, I've run probably 1,500 runs with them in, and then 3,500 probably without them. And I think without them, because you hit Whirlwind more often, you have to reset less often, you hit Flex marginally more often, because again the card pool is condensed even more. It has its real potential, and you hit whatchamacallit even more. The rare set, the rare card of the set. It's Flex, and you get your gold cards more often. You get your you're not that late, dude. I'm only like 15 cards in, and you can also try out what's it called? You get Offering more often. You get Double Tap more often when you don't have those cards unlocked. So yeah, but anyway, Iron Wave, pretty bad. 4.5 out of 5. It's rubbish. It is pretty bad, but it deals damage, so it has its minor place. Perfected Strike deals 6 damage, deals an additional 2 or 3 damage for all your cards containing Strike. Upgraded. I'm going to look at them generally upgraded because you aim to upgrade cards that are good and cards that are bad. Even if they're bad, even when upgraded, it means they're bad. So it's worth looking at just the upgraded form, and then if I actually don't know what the non-upgraded form is, I will click on it and you'll find out how little I play the card. So Perfected Strike is actually not terrible. You start the game with 5 strikes in your deck. You get this non-upgraded, and it deals 16 damage, I believe, if I do my maths correctly, because you have 5. When you upgrade it, it deals 21 for 2, which is really good value. And if you add, there are a couple of strikes that you'll see later that are actually pretty reasonable to add to your deck, and you can genuinely consider it. The issue being that you want to start removing them later, and this loses a lot of value once you start taking away the additional strength, the additional damage that it deals. And in addition, most strikes are not very good, and you don't want to add them to the deck or they're very average at best. So you don't want to add them to the deck, and if you do, you're diluting your deck out with more average cards, and you hit your Whirlwind less often. That's bad for speedrunning. So it's fine to pick up really, really early with the idea that you're going to remove it later. So it has that place. So I'd give it on a scale. I'd put it like dead in like a 2.5 because it has burst potential early on, or a 2 maybe even, like right on the verge of that sort of great to good. But I rarely take it because you often start removing them quickly. And if you happen to get a Pandora's Glitch, if that's what you're aiming to do, and you have this in your deck, this is awful once you remove all the strikes. Understandably so. So there's a lot of fun you can have with it, and when you're playing a random run and you're not able to reset, Perfected Strike can be really good. So again, put it like 2.5. Pommel Strike, 9 damage 1 card or 10 damage 2 cards when upgraded. It's pretty reasonable. It's not the best for speedrunning. Drawing cards whilst being a good feature of the card is slow when you're trying to speedrun. You have to watch the animation, you watch the deck recycle more often because you've drawn again. And I know that sounds like a really sort of backwards way to look at it, but it's true. So I'd rarely pick this up normally, but it's not bad. You're dealing 10 damage or 9 damage for 1 energy, which is strike levels, but you also draw a card, which could be a flex, could be an offering, could be the Whirlwind that you needed. So this is like mediocre level. Put it at a 3. Reasonable damage for the energy, and it draws cards, which generally isn't bad besides the animation. So Pommel Strike, yeah, it's like a 3, right? Again, right in that middle ground. Stroganoff doesn't deal damage. It's a pretty bad card in that regard, but it gives a lot of block for its cost, and it draws a card which could then be the linchpin you needed. So it's one of the better defensive cards for speedrunning, and if you roll into it, you get rid of your blocks first. You can even make a case for getting rid of your strikes as well before that, because it does cycle. That being said, it's a defensive card, so I'd put it in bad. It's just a 4. This is like the benchmark of what a 4 is when trying to speedrun. If you're speedrunning Ascensions, this is probably gains a lot of value very quickly, because you need the block, but we're not talking about Ascensions. And in an average run, maybe a 3.5 when you're not like re-rolling for Whirlwinds. I wouldn't pick this, but if I got it, I wouldn't be that disappointed with it. I'd be, whatever. So a 4. 4 for Stroganoff. Sword Boomerang. This is like 1 to 1.5. This is a really good card for speedrunning. It scales off of strength 3 times and then 4 times when you upgrade it. Therefore, it makes it slightly worse. Hear me out. Makes it slightly worse than Heavy Blade, because Heavy Blade scales off 3 or 5 times, which is basically Heavy Blade just says deal 14 damage, and then it scales off 4 times against this target or whatever. Whereas this is just randomized. However, the randomized thing can actually be really beneficial when you're gaining loads of strength. You're against, say, the oozes on the third act, the ones that regenerate after a turn, and you can like build loads of strength, sword boomerang, and it just goes bang, 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 and they all die. And you're sitting there like, oh, sweet, okay, cool. Heavy Blade can't do that, and it costs 2, which is prohibitively expensive, and makes a big difference when you're trying to speedrun. That being said, Heavy Blade's still good, but sword boomerang is. It's like Whirlwind's baby brother, because it scales off of strength so well, and it fits the deck archetype really well. And it doesn't exhaust, as Pummel does. So you get to play it again and again and again. So it's pretty good. I give it a 1 to 1.5. It's right up the top of what you're looking for. Just not quite Whirlwind God levels, which very few cards are. So yeah, pretty reasonable. Thunderclap. This is probably this is like a 1.5. Again, it's not essential, but vulnerable. This is what you want to replace your bash with. It's either this, trip, or bag of marbles. I'd say probably 2 of those 3 is what you really want, because sometimes you won't kill enemies on 1 turn. This is still like a whirlwind, like AoE. It does 7 damage rather than 8. From a baseline of the upgraded versions, but it applies the vulnerable, which then synergizes with everything subsequently. So really good card for speedrunning. Again, it hits all enemies. It's 1 cost, so it's not overly expensive as Bash can be. And yeah, I don't think I need to say much else. It's right on the line of I will sometimes take 2 of these. That might be a bit excessive. But sometimes you just need the AoE, the multiple AoE, and the vulnerable stacking for multiple turns is really good when you play more than one of them. That being said, if I already have a setup with a marbles and a trip plus, I probably wouldn't take another. I wouldn't take this as well, because it then clunks up the deck. You get your whirlwind less often. You die, or you just can't pull off the tricks you want to pull off if you take too many tertiary cards. This is the one that rides the line between being like a must pick and a pretty good pick. So yeah, I'd say this is 1.5. It's a very good card, and vulnerable is insane. And sometimes you need to get through layers of artifact. Sometimes if you're playing against Decker and Donu, you can't kill them in 1 turn. But if you already have a bag of marbles and a red mask, which just remove the artifact for you, you then play this and your whirlwind is going off again. So I think Thunderclap's, it's got a lot of potential. I think it's a 1.5. True Grit. Gain 7 block or 9 block, and the normal effect is exhaust a random card. The upper one is just exhaust a card. This is pretty terrible. You can, if you play this and you have your good cards in your hand, you can risk dying because you've played this. If you accidentally remove your whirlwind or your linchpin card that you needed because you've played this, that's terrible. And when you upgrade it, you get to pick, but that picking animation is slow. You're not looking to gain block. There's very few cards you want to exhaust anyway, because you should have just killed the opponent by that point. And if it's exhausting a wound or something, who cares? They should die not long after. This is a 5. This is a really, really bad card. for speedrunning. It's cool in other circumstances when you're trying to gain loads of block and you want to exhaust the, so you can use your body slams. But this is a terrible speedrun card in all categories. So yeah, 5. Yeah, rubbish. Absolutely rubbish. Twin Strike. Again, 5 damage twice or 7 damage twice for 1 energy. It's got the word strike, synergizes with perfected strike, so if you're going down that avenue in a random run, this is pretty reasonable. It also synergizes with strength builds better than most other cards do because it has 2 ticks of damage. So I would say it's like a pretty reasonable card to just pick up. If you re-roll into it, you keep this. You won't be getting rid of this unless you have nothing else to get rid of. Because it's much better than a normal strike. Baseline does 10 damage. Upgraded baseline does 14 damage. You add strength into the mix, it just ramps up further and further away from a single damage tick of a skill. So this is like a 2. This is a great tier. You can never really go wrong with it because it just deals a reasonable chunk of damage. So yeah, pretty good card, pretty great card even. Warcry costs 0 the whole time. They changed it. It's been reworked once, I think. It used to cost 1 and then drop to 0. So you draw 2 cards, you place a card, or draw 1 card or 2 cards, and you place a card from your hand on top of your draw pile and you exhaust it. Whilst this could be a reasonable mechanic to utilize, you don't have time to do this when speedrunning. This is a terrible card for speedrunning in almost all circumstances. This is a 5. Get rid of it before you get rid of your defense. Like, your defense are better than this. That's how bad it is. Wild Strike. Deal 12 damage, shuffle a wound into your draw pile, or upgraded. 17 damage. For 1 cost, that's a lot of damage, and a wound being added in is not like a huge deal. It is, but it's not. Because it gets added into your draw pile, you might hit it next turn, that can suck. But the fact that you're dealing 12 or 17 damage in one go makes this not a terrible card. Sometimes this will end a fight, especially early on in a speedrun. The further on you get in a speedrun, the less valuable this is to pick up, because your deck will be getting more refined, you're more likely to hit the wound, and 17 damage is less effective once you've got your flexes or your other big hitters. But that being said, that's a really good damage to energy ratio, and the wound isn't the worst thing in the world. It's not good, but it's not terrible. So although I rarely pick this up, it's mainly because it's just a bit different. And I think in old versions of the game, I could be wrong. I'm trying to have a quick look here. I'm not mistaking it for a different card, am I? Because there was, I think it used to make you vulnerable. No, that's Reckless Charge. So okay, never mind. Reckless Charge is the one I was thinking of. Yeah, so Wild Strike's pretty reasonable. I just don't pick it up. But you can do, and if you re-roll into it, you get rid of your strikes before this because it's double damage to what the strikes do almost. Well, that is literally double damage a normal strike, and that is almost double damage from an upgraded strike. So 17 damage 1 cost is good. So fair enough if you pick it up. I would give it like a 2 to 2.5. It's a good to great card, but I just never pick it up because I forget that it's actually reasonable. So yeah, we I don't know. I think maybe it needs more recognition. So we're on to uncommon cards now. Blue cards, they come up less often. Sometimes more valuable. And there's a couple of really absolute gems in this category. So we'll start with, again, we're doing alphabetically. So we'll start with Battle Trance. Battle Trance, draw 3 cards. You cannot draw any additional cards this turn. Upgraded is 4 cards. This is a pretty damn good card because card draw is good. Card draw is generally good in the game. Sometimes it's slow, the animation's slow in this, and that's annoying, but this is draw 4 cards and it costs nothing, and the only downside is that you cannot draw additional cards this turn. So it has a bit of anti-synergy with more than 1 copy. That needs to be very clear. I wouldn't pick up more than 1 copy of Battle Trance in any deck, because you play one, you draw into another, you can't play it. Just not worth it. It also obviously doesn't have synergy it doesn't have great synergy with Offering. But that's okay, because if you're drawing 4 cards, you're often getting a much wider suite of options. You can often just play the Offering for the energy, and then play your Flexes and your Whirlwinds, because it gets you a greater bulk of cards to just work with, which means you'll hit your Flexes and your Whirlwinds on the same turn more regularly. So this is like a 1, but you want 1 copy of it. You take more than 1 copy of it, you fucked yourself. You've played yourself. DJ Khaled, you've played yourself. So don't do that. But it's really really good because it costs nothing, so it doesn't interfere with your game plan. The only situation I probably wouldn't take one of these, and it sounds silly but it's true, is if you have Choker. If you have Choker as a relic, this will cause you to screw yourself over more than once, and that is because unlike Offering, you can often just play Offering, Flex, Whirlwind, and like you don't care because everything dies. With this, you have to play this, then you have to think about your plan just a little bit more because you didn't gain the energy as well. It also comes back round again and again, so once your offerings are gone, this is then just pure card draw, no interference with them. So often a fight will be over by then, but if it's not, this is really good. So again, a really, really premium card, well worth looking at. Blood for Blood. Costs 4 and deals 18 damage, but it costs 1 less for each time you lose, 1 less energy for each time you lose HP in combat. This is, and it costs 3 and deals 22 when you upgrade it. So fights will often not go on long enough for this to be of benefit, but I think it's an underrated card, especially when it got upgraded. It got boosted. The damage got boosted slightly, and when you have offerings in your deck, you're actually going to be tripping the lowering the cost of this, because it's just every time you lose HP in combat. If you lose armor, this doesn't lower in cost, but you can damage yourself, and that's why it can be quite effective. So I don't really pick it because again, sometimes you'll draw it and it'll cost 3 and you'll be screwed over. But I can actually see it genuinely, no joke, I haven't experimented around with it, genuinely not being a bad card to pick. Especially, again, we're talking in 2 different contexts here. One is the ultimate speedrun, which I can tell you now, for those of you who already probably know anyway, the ultimate speedrun will have Whirlwind, Flex, Offering, Double Tap. That's about it. That's all you need. Those are the 4 cards you pick. And some way to apply Vulnerable. Those are the 4 cards you pick for a speedrun. Basically, if you want to narrow it right down and refine it to its rawest roots. But this is an analysis that's covering that prospect, which puts them in God tier, and other few cards in God tier, and then covers the other aspect of, say, races on seeds that you haven't seen before and you can't reset on because you're running the same seed as someone else, for example. And that's the kind of context I'm trying to provide here on top of that initial just what's good for speedrunning, what's bad. So in terms of that situation, if you get ways to damage yourself, or if your fights are taking slightly longer than a normal, unseeded speedrun would, Blood for Blood could actually be pretty reasonable. This damage is not bad. This is good damage. The cost is a bit prohibitive at first, but once you take 2 hits in combat, one cost deal 22, that's really good. This is really good. Things that multi-attack you, birds or whatever, this is really good because it immediately costs nothing when they hit you. So it has its place. Not good enough for like pure speedrunning, I don't think, but for races where you don't get those like 5-minute runs and the run will take 10 minutes, say, or maybe even longer because you have to think more and you've got pressure on you for racing someone else, which sounds hilarious that it would add time, but it's true. This could be pretty reasonable. So, and obviously, if it cycles round and you've been hit 3 times, again, it costs 0. There's no prerequisites that Clash has, which is a good card. It just, once it costs 0, it costs 0, and you don't need to. Even if you have wounds in your hand, it'll deal this damage. So it's okay. It's like a 2.5 in those terms, in racing terms, in just that additional context. So not bad at all. Bloodletting gains 1 energy and you lose 3 HP for nothing, or you gain 2 energy and lose 3 HP for nothing. It's not bad. It's not bad. Unlike Seeing Red, which exhausts and will often be useless, this will come back around, but it's still not the best. It's not top tier either. It's one of the few cards that won't deal damage and won't draw you cards, but it will still be reasonable, and that's because it gains you energy. Energy is, as anyone who's played this game knows, the most important currency of the game. If you have enough energy, you can do whatever you want with your turn, as long as you have ways to play things. And that's why, Whirlwind builds rely so heavily on energy, and which is why this can be okay. That being said, it's not as good as Flex, because Flex, again, applies damage on all the attacks you do, whether or not they're Whirlwind. This only benefits Whirlwind and other really expensive attacks, which you will rarely have. So it's not terrible. It's all right. But it's just not like it's not the cream of the crop. It's like a 2.5, 2.5, somewhere in that middle ground between good, also great, and like mediocre. I feel like that's maybe a bit of a step down, but I did explain it at the beginning that I think mediocre and great or good are like they're the best ways to define the metric, because the good band doesn't have too many cards that fit it. Maybe I just needed 6 tiers. So Bloodletting is like a 2.5. It's not terrible. Wait, what quote? Wait, which one? That there's like the good cards or the bad ones. Hey Dreambook. So Burning Pact. Exhaust 1 card, draw 2 cards, or exhaust 1 card, draw 3 cards. It costs energy. It's bad. It takes time. You've got to pick which one you want to exhaust. There's rarely a target you want to exhaust when your deck is refined enough. It does have card draw, but you'd rather have Battle Trance or Offering, or most other forms of it are just better. So, yeah, this is like a 4.9. This is almost terrible. It's just about playable that I don't put it at a complete 5, but it's basically a 5. It's basically a 5. So yeah, we ditch this. We ditch this. You don't pick this. You re-roll into it. You consider getting rid of it, especially because, as well, another note, it has similar card art to Bloodletting. I know it is different, but orange hands. You glance at it, and if you don't play the game, if you don't pick lots of cards always, this can be really confusing. Not that you generally pick either of them, even though Bloodletting is okay. Burning Pact is bad, so it's like a 4.9. I'll just say, fuck it, it's a 5. Thank you for the bits, by the way, AJB. Thank you, man. Much appreciated. I do really appreciate it. So, yeah, Burning Pact. Yeah, don't pick it. Just get rid of it. Save yourself the trouble. Next card. Carnage. This is ethereal, so if you don't play it, it will evaporate from your hand at the end of the turn. And it deals 20 damage for 2. Upgraded does 28. This is a really good card to pick up early for burst, but again, a lot like other big hitters, it loses value over time as more fights have AoE. More fights have AoE, and you want to have got your Whirlwind and whatnot by that point, or your big hitter that you use to kill everything, Sword Boomerang, Heavy Blade. So this is, obviously not as good as Heavy Blade, but it starts at a much higher base level. So if you haven't got your flexes yet, this upgraded version that's 28 damage is really good. It's really good for just punching through enemies early on. So if you get offered this in like rooms 1 to 10, you can consider taking it for speedrunning. And again, in context where you're not always hitting Whirlwind every time, this is pretty reasonable. There will be times where you need to play something else and it evaporates and then you lose your big hitter. But that's not the worst thing in the world. There are worse things that could happen in terms of Slay the Spire, in terms of the speedrun that you're going through. But it's not quite there. It's like I want to put it like a 2.5. It's like a 2.5 again. Maybe I'm putting loads of things in 2.5 because, again, it's damage. Damage is never going to be below a 4. Actually, no, I put a Iron Strike or whatever, Iron Blade at 4.5. But point is, it's rarely ever going to be below 4. Rarely ever going to be below like a 3.5. But I think there's very few things that will actually fall in 3.5. Anyway, Carnage, reasonable card. I'll give it like a 2.5. Combust. This has been upgraded recently. On the version that I speedrun on, it does 4 or 5, which is pretty bad. This does 5 to 7. I mean, at this point, at this juncture, once it's gone up to this much damage, the upgraded version dealing 7 damage is actually not bad. Like, it's not bad. The animation is a bit clunky, but it's like an extra tick of Whirlwind with no damage, because it hits all enemies. I can see this being okay now, at this point where it's been upgraded. When it's 4 to 5, no, it just takes too long. You take damage, whatever. But when it's doing the equivalent of Mercury Hourglass, I think it's called, but it's doing more than double the damage, and it does it earlier, well, later technically, but it does it at the end of the turn before the enemies act. That's pretty reasonable. You do have to draw it, and that sucks, but it's like playing an unupgraded Cleave. Okay, not quite, but it's 7 to 8 damage to all enemies, and it just does it for 1 HP. If you kill one enemy that was going to hit you or negatively affect you with the tick of damage, or with 2 ticks of damage, you saved yourself way more health than you've cost yourself. I don't know how fast the animation is. I think it's a bit clunky, but at this point, that's actually a reasonable card. I would peg that at like a 2.5. In its current form, a 4 and 5 on the old patch that we play, it's pretty bad. But the more damage this deals, it's pretty reasonable, you know. So yeah, it's got its place, I guess. Ornithymimus, I'm going to be terrible with that name. I've actually already covered relics before. If you look at that link, there you go. That's the tier list. It needs a bit of updating. I haven't updated it since a couple of shifts with Frozen Eye and Question Card. But I can tell you now, Frozen Eye still sucks, and Question Card, but it no longer influences the actual relic pools, which is good. It only appears in shops. And Question Card is now quite good because it doesn't replace an energy relic. That's the only changes. There's also a video on YouTube that I put up, but it's a little bit outdated. No worries. It just would take forever to go through relics again. But there's a video on YouTube that covers all of it that I've done. Just search, I think, Slay the Spire relic review or something like that, and you'll be able to find it. So Combust in this form is actually pretty good. Like I said, 2.5. When it does 7 damage, that's really fucking good. It just adds a lot to your turn. Previously, though, it sucked. So, whatever. Corruption, one of the most broken cards when it comes to non-speedrunning, potentially. You can do some really whack shit with this and Dead Branch and do all your fun shit and get your highlight reels of you dunking Ascension 15 with constant exhaust skills that are being thrown at you. But in speedrunning, this sucks fat ass because it costs 3 and it doesn't deal any damage. Yes, it means you can, if you play this early and you narrow out your deck by just removing all of the skills that you didn't want, but it will remove your defense, which is fine. It will remove your flexes, which is terrible. And if you don't kill them in one turn, that will cost you a lot. But the fact it costs 3 is super prohibitive. You don't want something this clunky in your deck whatsoever. This is a 5. This is a 5 for speedrunning. It doesn't matter that it costs 2 when you upgrade it. It's still terrible because once you refine your deck down enough, you'll have no defense for this to hit. And the cards it does hit, your flexes, your offering's already getting exhausted, so it doesn't make a difference. But if it's hitting your flexes, you're fucking yourself over, and that's terrible, obviously. But it also costs 2 or 3 energy, so get rid of it. If you roll into this, feel really bad for yourself and remove it as soon as you can. Disarm. Enemy loses 2 or 3 strength, and it exhausts, and it costs 1. For speedrunning purposes, this isn't good enough. For non-speedrunning purposes, it's actually a pretty good card. Again, enemies that multi-attack, you can reduce the damage you take significantly when you hit something with Disarm. But no, you don't take this when speedrunning, even though it exhausts. It can belittle some fights, but it doesn't deal damage. Again, it doesn't deal damage, it doesn't kill the enemy, it doesn't add to the damage you're dealing, it doesn't give you energy. It doesn't do anything positive, and it costs energy. So, it's not a 5. It's not an unplayably bad card, but it's 4 to 4.5. It's just it doesn't deal damage, so that's enough. I think that's enough to be said about this kind of card. But I like it. It doesn't work for speedrunning. Dropkick. Deal 5 damage. If the enemy is vulnerable, gain energy, so it replaces the energy that it costs, and you draw a card, so it cycles as well. If it's upgraded, it deals 8. Again, one of those cards that can go infinite if you get lucky enough to reduce the deck down and get 2 of these. That being said, 5 and 8 damage, even if you can apply the vulnerable, which is quite easy because you start with a bash and you can upgrade it. It's the first card you aim to upgrade if you don't pick up another card. So it's quite likely that you get an upgraded bash. Sure, the cycle's alright, but the animation takes too long. 5 damage, which becomes 7 when someone's vulnerable. And 8 damage, which becomes 12 when someone's vulnerable. Or, if you get Paper Frog in there, you change it up a bit more. It goes up a little bit. But if you're dealing that much damage and you're taking the time to play it out individually, technically it's infinite damage, it's 0 cost deal that much damage. But then why don't you just play Clash? It's just not very good. Unfortunately, it's not bad. It's like a mediocre card because it does deal damage and it draws you a card. It replaces itself. It's got its functionality, but it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it. You don't want to waste your time with it when speedrunning. most of the time, so it's very mediocre. That's the definition of like a 3 card. Dual wield. Oh shit, sorry. Dual wield. So it costs 1. That's already a bad sign. Create a copy of an attack or power card in your hand. Upgraded creates 2 copies of it. So this works with clashes, and it works with about no other cards. Because it costs energy to do, so you'd have to be creating something you can play for free to neutralize that negativity from the cost. So if you're running a clash deck, obviously this is like normal explanation, but it works in speedruns too to some extent. If you're running a clash deck and you take dual wield, you'll have loads of fun. If you're not, because the only attack you really want in a speedrunning deck will be something that applies vulnerable or whirlwind, this is bad. This is really bad in most speedrunning decks. This is like a 5 in a whirlwind deck. It just doesn't work. In another deck, again, it's too situational to ever be super functional. Get rid of it. Get rid of it. It's a 5. It's like a 4.9 again, but it's a 5 for all intents and purposes. Don't ever pick this. With the rare exception that your deck is just a load of clashes, because then you can just create some crazy burst. But in reality, that's not going to happen regularly enough to choose it. And if you've already got your deck that's that good, this is just going to add to that. Sure, that's great, but you know that deck is prone to just getting like a wound chucked in there by a boss or by an enemy, and then you just die because you can't deal damage ever. Anyway, let's ignore it. Entrench. Everyone loves this for the memes, because I picked it once I accidentally clicked on it in a speedrun world record at the time, and everyone fucking loved it alongside the mango fight. The mango meme has remained. I've tried to quell the Entrench chat as much as I can, but hey, 2 cost, double your current block. Upgraded, 1 cost, double your current block. It's a 6. It's rubbish. You don't ever I don't ever play a block card, with the very rare exceptions that you might die if you don't. And therefore this will never, this is situational, and it does something when it is successful. It does something we don't care about. So Entrench is terrible for speedrunning. Get rid of it. If you get it, feel terrible about it and cry a little bit, and just move on with your life. Fuck Entrench. It's a terrible card. Hey Hair, by the way. Hey, how's it going? Evolve. 1 cost. When you draw a status, draw a card. Mango will never be forgotten. That's the idea. That's why I've got the mango emote. So there you go. So evolve. Whenever you draw a status, draw 1 card, or draw 2 cards if you have it upgraded. This used to add crap to your deck, used to add wounds to your deck, and do the same thing. So it was already ready to go. But the reality of it is that it's terrible. Even in both versions, it's terrible. It's a power that costs energy. It draws you cards if you have statuses that you hit. That can be useful, I suppose. Most of the time it won't be, and you'll waste your time picking it. You want to kill enemies faster than they can add that shit to your deck. So that's a 5. It's a 5. Don't pick it. You'll feel sad. Okay. Feel no pain. Whenever a card's exhausted, gain 3 or 4 block. It costs energy. It relies on a very specific thing, and it gains block. It doesn't deal damage. It's a 5. Don't pick it. It's rubbish for speedrunning. It's rubbish for speedrunning in all contexts. Hey Glass, yeah. But no, actually, there's nothing to defend this card. I don't even think it would be. I'm sure there's worlds in which it's really good, but this is not one of those worlds. So 5. Get rid of it. Don't ever pick it. Fire breathing. It costs 1 or 0, depending on if you have it upgraded. And at the end of your turn, for each attack you've played, this turn deals 1 damage to all enemies. This is a pretty bad card. The animation takes a little while. If you're playing a whirlwind deck, you will be playing 1 or 2 attacks on a turn. That's 1 or 2 damage. That's rubbish. And again, the animation's slow. It deals damage, so again, it's not awful. And in decks where you don't yet have a whirlwind, it will deal some damage. It's like adding the equivalent. The thing is, it's the equivalent of gaining 1 strength, right? This is a really good way of looking at it. It's the equivalent of gaining 1 strength on your attacks, but instead of dealing it when you hit the attack and being affected by things like vulnerable or whatnot, it ticks at the end of the turn, taking additional time, not really achieving much, and it's... Oh, sorry, okay. It does hit all enemies, so it is marginally better than just gaining strength on single target attacks. But imagine you're playing your Whirlwind. It's like you've gained... In fact, it's worse on Whirlwind. It gains like a % of a strength. It's rubbish. It's like a 4.5 because it does deal damage. But the animation's slow. I'd maybe even put it at a 5. I haven't used it in so long. I'm not sure if the animation's been sped up. So we'll just move on from it. PG Morrow, I'm planning on doing the Ironclad and the Defect. I'm not going to be looking at the Silent because honestly I haven't played it in quite some time and I don't feel like my opinion would be accurate. I don't think my review, if I was to review it, would be accurate. Or like reviewing the cards for speedrunning purposes. I haven't dedicated any time to speedrunning it. But I'm going to review those two. Because Ironclad needs to be reviewed, and I just wanted a place to point everyone. So when this review is up on YouTube, I'll be able to just say, "Hey, go check it out if you want to know my opinions on those cards." I don't think my opinion is going to change much on the Ironclad. It might on the Defect when we look at the Defect, because the cards will change. The Defect might be subject to change before it hits live. But I wanted to put something out that would be an interesting analysis, and I can separate the two videos. So Flame Barrier. Gain 12 block when you attack this turn, deal 4 damage to the attacker, and it's upgraded 16 block and 6 damage. So, 2 cost is bad. It gains block, which is generally bad. That being said, deal damage when you're hit. There are certain scenarios where this is really good. You play this against a bunch of birds. The birds are sad. They kill themselves, and you walk away from the fight the victor. That being said, in reality, it's bad. It's an energy gain. It costs. Sorry, it's a block gain. It costs 2. If they're not attacking you, it does 0 things. But for a defensive card, it's really good. Outside of speedrunning, it's exactly you get KFC if you play this against the fucking birds. So yeah, this is rubbish. This is rubbish for speedrunning. I'm sorry. I like the card. I really like what it does, but if speedrunning it doesn't work. So this is like a close to a 5, but it can be useful. It can be useful, but it so rarely is. So we'll just move on from it because I like the card, but that's the thing. This isn't me. What do I think about the card? This is my in terms of like how fun it is or how interesting it can be. This is how good is it speedrunning, and for speedrunning it sucks. So it's like I'd say it's a 4 because the 4 is bad and not useless. It's not unplayably bad. It's like a 4.5. Ghostly Armor, it's a block gain. Yes, it can be useful for surviving, but we don't need to survive when we have Whirlwind. This is a dumpster tier. This is a 5. The one upside for this against a against a defend, for example, is that it burns away when you don't play it. So you just don't play it, and then it reduces your deck size down. So yeah, it's. I think I put block at 4.9. This is like a 4.8. There you go. Be fair to defend. Defend. I put as a 4.9 because it is better than some other cards. But I figured that this needs recognition that it is marginally better. Oka, by the way. I've run it a couple of times. Sub 10. I've not run it too much. I've run it 100 times, maybe 150 times. I don't actually know the full amount of times I've run it, but I've got an 8-minute world record at the moment with Snecko Eye, which is hilarious. Like, not even a Snecko percent run. That was the fastest it's ever been run, as is the 909. I haven't seen anyone else get sub 10, but I'm sure people have. This tier list for Slay the Spire specifically. For speedrunning, yeah, I see what you mean. Sorry, Hair. Excuse me. This is for speedrunning, but I'm looking at it in 2 lights, right, for speedrunning. There is one light which says what is the the ultimate deck when you can reset loads, and if you're resetting loads, you're able to fuck around and wait till you get the Whirlwind and the flexes, and then if this review would take 2 minutes, I would say Whirlwind flex offering double tap. There you go have fun. That's not what I'm doing. What I'm doing here is analysing it from that perspective partly, and seeing other cards that if you get them through, random effects like transform effects, or if you need to pick something early on to just speed up your run, like a one big hitter, like a bludgeon or something, then that can be useful. But then the other side of it is going to be for speedrunning in context where, you're doing a blind race, like a seeded race, where you don't know the seed. And you get given the we'll look at the neutral cards as well. That is true, and curses and whatnot. Curses less so, but we can review curses. So yeah, we need to look at it from a perspective of doing excuse me, it's slightly different. It's if you're doing a run which is where you don't know what you're running, but you've been given, say, a seed to race someone else against the same seed, then you'll be able to. That's kind of the perspective I'm going for the angle of understanding that in a non-perfect scenario, what do you pick? In a scenario where you're not getting the whirlwind sometimes. So I'll look at it in both lights. But defend block cards are bad. This is a block card. This is a 4.8. It's just above defend because it gets rid of itself and it gains more block. Give it 4.5. Fuck it. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, Ghostly Armor Plus. There you go. Go buy a mama house. Okay, Hemokinesis. This is actually kind of an interesting card. Baseline deal. You lose 3 HP and you deal 14 damage for 1 cost. Upgraded, only you lose 2 and you deal 18 damage. This is a pretty good card. This is actually a really good card. Damage-wise, it does the same damage as Clash, but you lose a little bit of health and it costs a little bit without the prerequisite that you have to have an empty hand, or a hand, sorry, not an empty hand, a hand with no non-attack cards. So, as an early burst card, this is perfectly fine. For the energy cost, it's one of the best, besides zero cost cards, which are infinite technically. This is one of the best energy costs. If you could get 3 of these or triple this up, take 6 damage, deal 54, it would be much better than even Bludgeon, which is like the Mac Daddy of big hammers, the things that you slam the bosses with and just steamroll them if you can. So Hemokinesis is a pretty good card. I would say it's actually about a 2. I would probably rarely buy it from a shop because I'm speedrunning in a very different context to what I'm trying to analyze. I've usually speedrun in a context where I'm only going for the whirlwind and the flex and the double tap and the offering. So in a world where you're just running a seed and you have to run it, and this might be really good, this is going to be a pretty good card. This is a 2. This is like a good card, a great card. Especially because you lose 2 HP, but if you kill something that was going to deal more than 2 HP, you've healed yourself for the amount of damage you were going to take, and you've sped up the fight because they've died. So there's a lot that comes from it. So a very good card actually. So yeah, we'll move on from it. Infernal Blade costs 1 and upgraded costs 0. Add a random attack to your hand. It costs 0 this turn and it gets exhausted. It's too unreliable to be good, but it's not bad because it's always an attack, right? It's always an attack card that you get. Unfortunately, that attack card could be Body Slam because that's an attack, and you have no block, so it's useless. However, on average, can we filter by just... We can filter by... Oh, wow, we can. So if we just look at the attacks really briefly, this is just with my own context here. You have like Bash, Strike. Well, I don't think you can get Strike. You probably can get Bash, but I don't think... I don't know. If you can get one, you probably can get the other. So maybe you can't get either. Just looking through these. I mean, attack cards are what you want, right? None of these are inherently awful because they all say deal X damage, right? But when it's unreliable, if you get it randomly, that's fine. If you get it, we can filter by rarity. There we go. Rarity A to Z, is it? Oh God, I fucked it. That should do it. Oh God. Wait, if we return and go back to card library. Yeah, it's back in alphabetical order, but also in the right order. Thank fuck for that. So, let's go back to Infernal Blade. It's never going to be terrible. It's just a very mediocre card. It has the potential of hitting you Whirlwind when you don't have it yet. That's great for that one fight. But then the time it gets you Body Slam, you're like, oh great, I just basically drew a curse. That sucks. So, mediocre. Like, too hard to evaluate and give it, like... It's always amazing or always terrible. It's just it's a dice roll where you get like 5, let's say like 10 cards that you actually want to see and 20 that you don't. If you get one of the 10, you feel great, and if you get one of the 20 that you didn't want to see, you feel kind of shit that you picked this card. But it's 0 cost and it makes the thing cost 0. So yeah, that's great. And you could. Oh, it's only this turn as well. So when you re-roll back around to it, it costs its full whack again. Yeah, it's a mediocre card. Not much else can be said. Inflame, gain strength. That's good words. These words we want to read. Gain 2 strength or upgraded, gain 3 for 1 cost. Probably the only power you should take in a speedrun, or consider taking. It's got a slow animation, so in a ultimately refined speedrun, you rarely take this. But in a run where you're not able to guarantee that you're going to hit those cards, 3 strength on anything is really good. It makes all the cheap damage cards a lot more effective. Things that hit multiple times become a lot more effective, and it stays every turn, so you don't need to keep drawing it. It has a slow animation. That sucks. Like whenever you play it, you'll see it sort of like go pew pew, fly across and pop on you and make loads of bubbles go everywhere. That's adorable, but my god, is it slow. That being said, it says gain strength. If the animation was fast, I would peg this at like a 2, maybe even slightly higher, like a 1 point something, somewhere between 1.5 and 2. In reality, though, the animation brings it down to like a 2.5. That's a 2.5. Between great and mediocre because the animation's too slow. If they sped up all power animations, there would be a case for picking up this and maybe, like, I'll look at the powers later, but maybe one other power. But this is the best power that you'll get for speedrunning, because Demon Form is too slow and costs too much. So yeah, not bad. And 3 strength is like a that is a flex. That is a flex, almost plus. It's between flex and flex plus, so it's like a flex. That's what it is. It's flex thumbs up. That's what we'll call it. But it's permanent, so that's really good, but a little bit slow. So 2.5. Intimidate. Applies 1 week to all enemies, exhausts, and upgraded applies 2 week, and it costs nothing. So costing nothing's fine. It exhausts, so it's fine. If you roll into it, it's not terrible. But weak does nothing to speed up killing enemies. It does hit all of them. It's got a plus side, I guess. But it's the fact that it exhausts itself keeps it from being a 5. It's like a 4. It's just a bad card. It's like playing a block card. And it gets rid of itself, and it costs 0. So there's these like minor perks, from it, but it's just not good enough. And it lasts for 2 turns when you upgrade it. But it's just not good for speedrunning, really. It's just not unplayably bad. Metallicize. At the end of your turn, gain 3 or 4 block, whether it's upgraded or not. 1 energy, 2 slow, block gain. Animation even eats up a tiny bit of time. This is like a 5. This is a 5. Don't pick it. Don't pick it. If you get it, remove it. I would probably remove a block rather than this. Sorry, a defend. I call it block for some reason. I'd rather remove a defend than this. So maybe it's a 4.8. Again, it's that kind of tertiary. Well, it's like an Orichalcum, or Orichalcum, as some people will fucking like threaten me with death if I call it Orichalcum, because apparently CH makes a K sound. It's like that relic, but it's slightly smaller. So in that case, it can't be terrible, but it has a slight animation time, and you have to play it and draw it. And fuck it. It's for 4.8. There you go. I'm gonna leave before I piss myself off more about the pronunciation of that word. Power through. Add 2 wounds to your hand. Gain 15 or 20 block. Again, gains block. Who cares? We don't need to block. He calls it Ori. Yeah, that's one way to do it, but then people will think you're talking about the Blind Forest. Power through, yeah, rubbish, 5. Adds wounds to your hand, which you'll eventually redraw. The hand is the best place for them to be added to, because unless it fucks over clashes. But it's a terrible. Never pick this for speedrunning. You get this, you remove it before you remove block. Defend. Jesus. So you just want to remove this. It's rubbish. 5. Pummel. 1 energy, deal 2 damage 4 times, and it gets exhausted. If you upgrade it, deal 2 damage 5 times. So this is the 1 cost card that scales with strength 5 times. It's like Heavy Blade's baby brother, and it taps loads of times, which is generally a good thing against enemies, except the plant on the second act, because then you hit it loads, and then it gains loads of block. But generally speaking, it's a good thing. This is the one downside is that it exhausts. If this didn't exhaust, it would be like, again, Heavy Blade territory. Its base value, its base damage is much lower, because it's obviously 2 damage, so the base damage is 10 versus 14 for the Heavy Blade. But it scales just as well, and it costs 1. It's just a shame that it exhausts, that's all. So yeah, this is like a 1.5. You don't always pick it, and it costs a lot in the store because it's an uncommon card. You'd rather see Whirlwind and be really happy. But yeah, like it exhausts, so you can only play it once. So if you get it on a turn when you don't have your flexes, you either don't play it and miss out on damage, or you play it and deal 10 damage and you feel like kind of sad about it. So yeah, 1.5. Rage, 0 cost. This has been reworked. Possibly I can't remember if the patch I'm playing on has this reworked or not, because I never pick it. It's not a bad card though. This could work well in Ascension speedruns because you're going to play attacks and it costs 0, so it doesn't interfere with your Whirlwind, for example. But it's gained whenever you play an attack this turn, gain 3 block or 5 block if it's upgraded. It costs 0, like I said, but it's a block card. It's a 5. Get rid of it. Get it out of here. Get it out of here. Go. It's gone. It's gone. It's gone. Rampage. 1 energy, deal 8 damage. Every time this card is played, increase its damage by 4 for this combat. Upgraded. Increases the damage it deals subsequently by 8. In a really small deck, people think that this might be good for speedrunning. They're wrong. Simply because you'd rather play Whirlwind, hit end turn, and then play Whirlwind again if the deck was that small, rather than deal 8 damage, then 16 damage, then 24 wow, mind-blowing. In like, for infinite decks, where you can, like, make this cost 0 and cycle back round to it again and again and again and again and again, it's... I mean, yeah, have fun with that. That's going to be super fun. It would actually be fun. I sound like I'm being sarcastic. That's just me being British. It's 2 different things. Excuse me. For speedrunning purposes, it's not good enough. It's... Compared to an upgraded Strike, it actually does less damage when it's upgraded. It's just not good enough. It's not good enough. Because the damage per energy is not good enough. Kind of the same story with Anger, but Anger costs 0, so Anger's better than this. I think I pegged Anger at like a 2.5 to a 3, depending on circumstances, but this is just not good enough. This is like it's a 3.5. It's right between mediocre and bad, because it's just like adding another strike to your deck, and you don't want to do that. And it doesn't have the word strike, so it doesn't even synergize with Perfected Strike. So yeah, I don't place it. It's 3.5. It's a lot of fun. It's a fun card. It's a card almost necessary for a digital card game, because it's just cool. You can sort of keep doing it again and again and again when it comes back around, but yeah, it's not good enough. Oh, I skipped one there. Reckless Charge. Deal 7 damage, shuffle a Dazed into a draw pile. Deal 10 damage, shuffle a Dazed into a draw pile. This one's really hard to evaluate because it costs 0 and deals damage. That's a good thing. But it eats up a card draw in the future. Only once. Only once. But is this damage enough? Rarely. It fucks with Clashes, which are a similar style card that has a different prerequisite. I'm occasionally catching chat, yeah, Sky. I'm looking over, but I'm recording this for YouTube purposes as well. So for, you know, I'm trying to focus mainly on it, but I am looking at chat as well. And so Reckless Charge, mediocre. It does damage, it costs nothing, but it fucks with your draws. That's kind of a shame. So I did say your name, Sky BH. There you go. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas, buddy. No, I like I said, I'll be watching this stuff. I'll be checking chat occasionally, but I want to focus on this. So Reckless Charge, yeah, mediocre card, maybe slightly above mediocre, but not far, because it adds crap to your draw pile. It will interfere with other cards, other card draws. Only once, that's great. No longer makes you vulnerable. I honestly think when it made you vulnerable, it was actually better for speedrunning, because usually you'd kill people fast enough that being vulnerable did not matter. But that's, you know, they don't design all the cards specifically for speedrunner purposes, and so I can't expect them to listen to, if I say that to them, for them to go, ah yes, we agree. It's cool. It's Reckless Charge and it dazes you. That's thematically cool as well as just becoming vulnerable, like a reckless attack in as a barbarian in D&D. So yeah, that's cool. It's cool. Mediocre though. Mediocre, just above mediocre. Rupture is awful. Costs 1 power. Whenever you lose HP from a card, gain 1 strength. It costs 0 when you upgrade it. Just because it costs 0 doesn't mean it's good. The only cards that this would trigger off are Offering that you pick. If you have a Hemokinesis, sure, maybe it would trigger. But you've got to draw it, and then you're gaining 1 strength. If this upgrade went from 1 to like 2 to 3, or something like that, if it gained 2 and then gained 3, if you upgrade it, maybe there'd be a fringe place to pick it. Because as long as you can trigger it once, in this theoretical world where it gains more strength than 1, then you'd be able to pick, when you play your Offering, you're essentially using Inflame Plus. That would be cool, but that's not the case. That's not the case. This would trigger like at most 3 times in a fight with Offering, Hemokinesis or something. That's not good enough. This is a dumpster card. It's 5. Get rid of it. Get it out of here. Next card. Searing... Did someone say Searing Blow? Well, I did. This is also a lie on the right hand side. I mean, obviously this is an exception to the rule, but it says cards can only be upgraded once, and then says it can be upgraded any number of times. It's a lie. But did someone say Searing Blow? They did. So this scales up really well. Vintage memes, yes, that's what we're here for. So this scales up really, takes a while to get the ball rolling with Searing Blow. It goes up 4, then 5. I'm not sure if it's how it scales. If it's plus, whatever the plus is, it sort of goes up by 4 plus that amount or something. I don't know what the actual scaling rules are for it. But it's so fun. Searing Blow is so fun if you get it early. And if you have, again, this is going as an aside, if you have Armaments Plus, and you have 2 of them in your deck, or just 1 Armaments Plus, and you have a small, narrow enough deck that works, you can have a whole load of fun upgrading a Searing Blow to nuke everyone. But for speedrunning purposes, committing all of your upgrades to this only works when you can make the deck incredibly small. It's a load of fun. You can check out, again, self-promotion. You're probably watching this on Twitch, or more likely YouTube, because more people will watch that than the 62 people that are watching now. You can go and check my Searing Blow Snecko Eye run, where I have a whole lot of fun playing this. It's super fun. Self-promotion. Go enjoy it. Those of you watching on Twitch can go check it out too. Doesn't mean you can't, but I'm going to carry on with this. In terms of a speedrunning card, though, it's too clunky. It's too big, unfortunately, for a realistic speedrun. But you can have a whole load of fun with it. So I would rate this as a mediocre card. It's not even, for 2 cost 12 damage, that is strike levels of damage. Upgraded once, it's not even as good as upgraded strike levels of damage for the energy cost. You need to upgrade it at least twice for it to be okay. Yeah, I mean, it's fun as fuck, but yeah, it's mediocre for speedrunning. So maybe even lower than that, maybe a 3.5. But it's super cool. Second wind, 1 energy skill. Exhaust all non-attack cards from your hand and gain 5 block for each. When it's upgraded, it gains 7 block for each. So it can get rid of all non-attack cards in your hand. That has the potential to be good. Obviously, you can get rid of all your defends, so you no longer draw them. So you're just drawing attacks. That's cool, and this. But it's rubbish. It is rubbish. That is not a good enough reason to play this card in your deck. To add this card to your deck. Get rid of it. It's a 5. It's awful. The exhaust effect is not good enough to warrant playing this. And you might use it and remove your flexes or your offerings, and this is not worth 7 or 5 block. The best part of this card for a speedrunning perspective is the removal of other cards from your deck for the rest of the fight, as exhaust does. But it's not worth it. 5. Get rid of it. Seeing Red, one of the slightly more polarizing cards in terms of people's opinions of whether or not it's good. So, in terms of a Whirlwind deck, gaining energy is so crucial. If you have Ice Cream, this card is insane. This card is insane if you have Ice Cream, because you just play it whenever you want. It gets out of your hand, it costs you nothing, gains you 2 energy, and then when you get to your Whirlwind turn, it just has that extra punch, that extra 2 ticks that will completely obliterate your opponent. You have your double tap, that's insane, 2 extra ticks, 4 extra ticks. You got your Necronomicon and your double tap. 2 extra ticks, 4 extra ticks, 6 extra ticks because of this fucking card. That's nuts. That's why Offering is so good, because it draws you cards, it adds energy, and no one cares about the 4 damage it deals. However, getting back down to earth here, compare this to Flex, right? Compare Seeing Red and Flex. I analysed this on the Flex, so I'm not going to go into it in too much depth. But with Flex, any attacks you have when you draw Flex are improved by Flex. Therefore, Flex is really good. It's a coverall good card, because it just makes all the other attacks better. And often you'll have 3 energy and you'll draw 3 strikes, so the flex isn't interfering with any other energy plays. Seeing Red, however, you play this. It is a good card, by the way, but it's not crucial. You play this and you have your Whirlwind. Great, you're doing 2 more ticks of damage, or you can do something else. You can play double tap and it's still doing, a huge number of ticks, and wow, you go crazy with it. But if you draw this and you don't draw your Whirlwind and you don't have Ice Cream to store the energy for later, you're often going to draw it, play it, and then just play your 3 strikes anyway and just float the mana. Or play like a Defend, which slows you down. Oh, that's painful, AJ. That's rookie error. But you just sacrificed for Snecko. I don't know where Emp is. Emp's disappeared a little bit. But, that being said, Seeing Red is still a reasonably good card because it gains you energy. You will occasionally draw it on your Whirlwind turns. And when you do, whoop-de-fucking-do, you feel great about yourself. If you have Unceasing Top, as an aside, if you have Unceasing Top and you don't have any wounds or curses in your deck, this card's pretty reasonable because you can just start cycling way more and it makes it way more effective. But in terms of quality of card, this is like a 2. This is a 2. It's not essential. I'll pick it up occasionally because of the way the energy gain works. But with Ice Cream, this becomes like a 1. This becomes a 0. It's insane. But it's just, I'd rather have, you mangled him. I'd rather have, what's it called? Offering. All the time on this. Anyway, moving on. Sentinel and Sentinel Plus. Gain 5 block. If it's exhausted, it also gains you 2 energy. It costs 1 to play. And upgraded, it's 8 block and 3 energy regained. It says block. You have to use an exhaust mechanic. It is bad. It's a 5. Don't add this to your deck. Feel bad if you do. I literally need to say no more about it than that. You're never going to trigger this in a speedrunning scenario, I don't think. And therefore, just don't waste your time picking it up. Sever Soul. Exhaust all non-attack cards in your hand. Deal 16 damage, and it costs 2 energy. Upgraded costs deals 20 damage. So the burst isn't the highest, right? This isn't the highest burst you can get from a 2-cost card, especially early in the game. There's things like Carnage, things like Heavy Blade with a bit of strength. There's lots of ways to deal more with 2. That being said, if you pick this up very early on in a run, dealing 16 damage and 20 damage is good. Removing and exhausting all of the non-attack cards, i.e. the defends that you don't want to be drawing and you haven't had time to remove any yet, and removing curses or wounds, like status effects, this can be really good. This can actually be a good card to pick up early on. This falls into the 2 category again. It's a great card. It's not essential, but if you pick it up early, you can sometimes do some really good work with it and make your flesh your deck out even more. It works well with Clash as well, because sometimes you'll have Clash, you'll not be able to play it because you've drawn a curse or you've drawn whatever. You play this, boom, you get your Clash damage on top of it. So it has many synergies that way as well. Just make sure you play your flex before you play this, otherwise you're going to be a sad person, camper, individual. But I think I will pick this up early occasionally. I've stopped doing it as often now because I'm going for the most refined times. I'm trying to go for a sub 5, but in reality this is still worth picking up a lot of the time, and in races where you're having to run a specific seed, this is a pretty good card. So it's a 2. Shockwave, 2-cost skill, apply 3 weak and vulnerable to all enemies and exhaust. Upgraded as 5. Not a bad card, but a bit slow for how do I define reset speedrunning, where you're resetting again and again and again to get the ultimate results. In that scenario, this is generally not good enough, even though it applies vulnerable for a significant period of time. That being said, it's good for a couple of reasons, because it applies the weak first, then the vulnerable. So if something has 1 artifact, the weak will sponge the artifact, and the vulnerable will then be applied, and it hits all enemies in that regard. So it could be good as basically neutralizing Decadonu or the Collector, or a boss fight. You play this and you just trip it all on everyone and you kill them faster, they deal less damage, so if you are low health it can be helpful. But it's still not great. It's like a 3.5. The effect is fine, it hits all enemies, it exhausts, so once you play it once it's gone. That's good. That's a good thing for this card. But it is just too slow to be generally effective in speedrun. So like I said, it's a 3.5, maybe a 3 actually. It has its place, but it doesn't say deal damage, so it can't be amazing generally. It doesn't add strength or say deal damage or draw cards or gain energy. So yeah, it's a 3. I'll give it a 3. Spot Weakness, a card that I don't have because I play at level 0, generally speaking. But Spot Weakness is 1 cost. If an enemy intends to attack, gain 3 or 4 strength, depending on whether or not it's upgraded. It says gain strength. That means it's got potential. Unfortunately, they've improved it slightly, I believe. They've made it so you can just play it rather than target them, I think. Maybe you do have to target them still, I don't know. But the way it reads here is that you don't need to. I can't tell, for sure. So, this is cool, but it's just the conditional nature of it, where you're not guaranteed that an enemy's going to be attacking that turn, you draw it. That's bad. And even if it does work, right, it's 1 energy, 4 strength. Yes, the strength is permanent, it stays for the rest of the fight, unlike Flex, but it is just, you still have to target. Okay, thanks for the heads up. But the way it's phrased sounds like you don't. I'm doing well, thank you, Fufo. You've not missed Whirlwind. It's possibly the next card. It's 2 cards along. So, Spot Weakness. Yeah. Mediocre. It's a 3. It gains strength. That's not a bad thing. So yeah, reasonable card. Uppercut. 2 energy, deal 13 damage, apply 1 weak, apply 1 vulnerable. Upgraded just bumps up the number of turns, or the number of weak and vulnerable by 1. Yeah, it's a good card, actually. It's a good card. You wouldn't pick it when you're going for the ultimate speedrun, but when you're, again, racing, it's a really good card, because vulnerable is good, weak is, fine, and 13 damage for 2 cost is pretty good early on. It's not the best. You know, it's eclipsed by things like Sever Soul, by Heavy Blade and whatnot, but those status effects alone allow other cards to deal more damage. So it sort of packs its damage in with the vulnerable as well as the actual hit. So compare this to Bash. So 13 damage, 2 weak, 2 vulnerable for 2. That is upgraded. Obviously, it's 1 and 1, and that's why Bash has situational better scenarios. So unupgraded, it does 8 and 2 vulnerable. Upgraded does 10 and 3. So 3 can be useful, but compare that to Uppercut, or compare unupgraded thing to Uppercut. It does 5 more damage, applies 1 weak as well. 2 weak and 2 vulnerable. And even upgraded, you're missing out on 1 turn of vulnerable for 3 damage, and it applies weak. So, just to give you context, Uppercut is a very good card. It's just not good enough in the ultimate speedruns, but when you're racing and whatnot, very good card to pick up. Exactly, it's a mashup of the two. It's a mashup of Bash and what's it called? Sorry, Clothesline. Thank you. But the thing about Clothesline is Clothesline's excuse me, Clothesline's base damage is higher than Bash's. Bash rolls again like this. It rolls its damage into the into the base attack. So if we go quickly find Clothesline, just for context as well. Clothesline, it's a common card. There we go. 12 damage, and upgraded does 14. That just hits harder than Bash, but Bash applies vulnerable. So they make those trade-offs. That's cool. So Uppercut places like 2 as well. It's a good card. It hits hard. It applies status effect. It removes artifact if that's what you're looking for. So yeah. This is dumpster tier. This is 5. Don't need to talk about it. Barricade. This is premium. No. Okay. So Whirlwind. This is the card I need to spend the least time talking about. If I'm completely honest, it's an X cost card. It's Whirlwind. Deals 5 damage to all enemies. X times, aka X being the amount of energy you have at that point, and it will use up all your energy. You are all very aware of this, I imagine. Upgraded deals 8 damage to all enemies, X times. Yeah, this is how you speedrun. You pick this card, you feel good about it. Yeah, I mean, it hits all enemies. That's the fact. There's 3 factors I think that make it. There's several factors. I'm not going to say 3 because I may say more. I may say fewer. 1 1, it hits all enemies. That is a good sign for a card. Dealing damage. So it deals damage to all enemies. This is a good thing. You know, AoE fights are the bane of speedrunners a lot of the time. You've got the gremlins, you've got the oozes, you've got the other oozes on the 3rd act, you've got the shapes on the 3rd act, you've got the birds on the 2nd act, you've got the knight and white mage in the 2nd act, you've got the collector, Decadonu, the ooze when it splits, if it splits. A lot of the most annoying fights in this game, and all 3 bosses that you aim to fight when you're speedrunning, are AoE based. So hitting all enemies is super crucial. That goes without saying. Secondly, the base damage per energy is not great, but it scales per the amount of energy you have. So if this said deal 100 damage to all enemies X times, but you had 1 energy, you'd deal 100 damage. And then once you start ramping up the energy, the strength gain that the strength or the damage that each tick is dealing is worth more. So it's like there's a balancing act between wanting loads of energy and dealing loads of damage. So which is why Flex is so good, because Flex just bumps up this damage by 4 times the number of energy you have, and it costs nothing, which is why it's so premium. So you combine the two, boom, you've got yourself Whirlwind, bread and butter. Yeah, the more it's horrible. Third and foremost, actually, I don't think it's. I mean, the art's sick. Look at it. It looks budget. Like, don't get me wrong. This is one thing about Slay the Spire. The artwork is quite simplistic, but that's, I think, one of its charms, if anything. And the gameplay is what makes it so good. That's why people play it so much. It is absolutely outrageous. You'd have to explain out a little bit more what you mean, Magic, with that question. I don't know what you mean exactly. You're saying if it didn't hit multiple targets, then it'd be not very good. It would be skewer. Yeah, if it got removed, I would say Heavy Blade would become the next technique of winning, I think. Heavy Blade, big hitters, things like that. Maybe Perfected Strikes. You know, those are the sort of ones that sit tertiarily on the edge. But without AoE, you'd struggle a lot to speedrun effectively. But yeah, like the best card, the most important card for speedrunning. This is like top of tier 1. Without it, you can't compete with the world records. You can't. You simply cannot. So yeah, godlike card for the Ironclad. Absolutely fantastic. Now onto the rares. There are fewer of these than there are others, I think, in the game. But there's still several of them, so we'll go through them. It will just take a little bit less time, mainly because a lot of them suck. Barricade, 3 cost. Block no longer expires at the start of your turn. Upgrades to cost 2. This is dumpster tier. This is like one of the worst cards you can get because it's expensive, so it interrupts your plays. It doesn't do anything positive when you play it. I mean, yeah, is that not enough of a reason not to pick it? It's a power. It's just another annoying thing. At least it goes away once you play it, but my god, is it bad. Berserk. 1 cost. If your HP is at or below 50%, gain energy at the start of each turn. Upgraded, it costs 0 to play. Well, speedrunning wouldn't end. It would just become a different thing. When we have a ladder reset, when the game releases, the different strategies would have to be figured out before or at that point. So Berserk, yeah, like I said, 1 cost, 0 cost makes a minor difference. Less on this because it's unlike, for example, Barricade, where the 1 cost difference means that you can actually add in a block play, play a defend, play a something else with it that gives you the block and synergizes with this card. You don't get that with Berserk. You don't get something that makes this happen or work better alongside it because it costs less. That being said, a 0 cost card is still nice. Gaining energy is still nice, but having to manage your health and get it below 50% is a bit difficult to reliably do it, and you have to draw this. Unlike Red Skull, the relic that gives you 3 strength if you are at 50% or below health, this you have to draw and play. That's bad. That is a bad thing, unfortunately, but it's not a terrible card. It is just very mediocre, because I think the effect is actually quite good. Gaining 1 energy at the start of each turn when you're damaged works really well with Whirlwind, because your Whirlwind deals damage based off of the number of energy you have. Yeah, it's got its place, I suppose, but it's pretty mediocre, and you wouldn't pick it most times. Yeah, moving on from that. Bludgeon, 3 cost, the Mac Daddy of big hammers. The picture is someone's head being imploded by a mallet. It says deal 32 damage and upgraded. It deals 42 damage. This is one of the cards you want to upgrade as soon as you get it, because the jump from 32 to 42 is a significant one. Like that's really important. It's a bit like Armaments, for example. Armaments, it upgrades one card, which you have to pick and is slow, to upgrading everything else. Like once you get an Armaments in your deck, like if you have one, you don't pick it when you're speedrunning generally, but if you have it, you upgrade it as soon as you can. Same thing with Whirlwind, same thing with Flex, same thing with Bludgeon. Bludgeon, you get this early, you can just use it to just punch everything down really quickly when you don't yet have your Whirlwind. So it's got its place. That being said, it's not like the best card ever. That's what Whirlwind's status is for speedrunning. But it is still pretty good. This is like a 2... Yeah, it's a 2... Maybe just below 2, like a 2.2 or something. But I'm not trying to attribute specific point scores. I'm trying to give a general place and where it would fall. This is a great card. It's just... It's a little bit slow. So yeah. Bludgeon, big hitter. I like it as a card, but I think it is a little bit slow. Too slow for speedrunning regularly, but it can be good early in the run. Like if you get this on floor 1, you can use it to punch through a couple of fights immediately. Like they have 42 health, 50 health maybe, but you'll guarantee yourself a 2-turn kill if not a 1-turn kill. Brutality. At the start of your turn, lose 1 HP and draw 1 card, cost 0. Upgraded means it's innate, which means it starts in your hand on the first turn of combat. This is a pretty average card, average to poor, because you're taking damage, the animation's a bit slow, the draw comes afterwards, it's just a bit weird, and you have to draw it as well. So you have to have a fight that goes on for 3 turns. So the first turn you draw this, and that eats up another draw. The second turn you then take the 1 HP and you draw 1 additional card. So you've drawn the number of cards you would have, and then you start seeing the real rewards the third turn onwards. And the longer the fight goes on, yeah, it gains more value from drawing cards, but it's not very good. Don't waste your time with this. This is a 4. It's a bad card. It's just not terrible because it has some minor boon of drawing more cards, more likely to hit flexes on the same turns as you hit your Whirlwind. Simple as. Dark Embrace. 2 cost power whenever a card is exhausted. Draw 1 card. Drops down to 1 cost when it's upgraded. Rubbish card. You're not aiming to exhaust many cards at all. And those cards that you do exhaust, aka offering, are already drawing you 3 to 5 cards. Who cares that you're drawing 1 more? You have to draw and play this, and it costs energy. It's bad. It's 5. Get rid of it. I love the artwork though. Hands just pulling him into the void. Demon Form. 3 cost. At the start of each turn, gain 2 or 3 strength, depending on not it's upgraded. In a long fight, in runs where fights go on for longer, this is an insane card. Even if you, especially if you have Whirlwind, but it is too slow for most speed runs of the Ironclad when you're trying to be as fast as possible. It's just a little bit too slow for that, unfortunately. I love the card. I love this artwork. As simplistic as it looks, I used that as one of my thumbnails for, I think it was my 6-minute 47 speedrun back in the day, and I just love it. It's fucking demonic. It's just the Ironclad going like ape shit and getting absolutely jacked because he's tapping into the inner demon shit that he made a deal with, or whatever his little backstory is. And yeah, every turn you ramp strength, go nuts, it's super fun. But it's just too slow. So in terms of speedrunning, gain strength, that's a good thing. It's too slow, that's a bad thing. Peg it mediocre, right in the middle, 3. There you go. Because it can, if you have a Sneck run, yeah, you can just add this into your deck and it'll cost 1 or 2, and all of a sudden you go off on 1. So yeah, there's a place in a Sneck deck for Demon Form. Double Tap, another one of the premium cards. 1 cost. This turn, your next attack is played twice. Upgraded, your next 2 attacks are played twice. This is like a 1. It is not as good as all the other cards in the deck. That sounds weird to say, right? That sounds weird to say, but it is one of the like you have your Flex, Whirlwind, Offering, right? Those are the trifecta of good cards. This is just like an added huge bonus. But I still think, despite the fact that it is really powerful, I still think that it is the least important part of those cards. Because all of those cards function well on their own. This doesn't really. Like, you have this in a deck without your Whirlwind, you're double hitting with like a bash. And that's great. You deal 20 damage rather than, oh, what is it? Like, if it's upgraded, 10, you deal 25 damage. Ooh, Woo! And you applied 6 turns of vulnerable. Whoa! Who cares? You could have just not. I don't know. It's not that good, right? But when you have your whirlwind, this is like Necronomicon. This is the thing that pushes it from great to extreme. So this is like it's still a 1 rated card for speedrunning. But in a deck where you don't have whirlwind, you just need to make sure that you have another big hitter to punch with this. And Necro is generally better because it doesn't eat up a draw, or when it does, it's always active, and it doesn't eat up an energy. So this is this is a great card, but just not I don't know. It's not it's a 1. It's just the least important of the 4, the final thing you want to pick up in terms of your speedrun. Exhume, 1 cost. I rarely see this because this is an unlock that I have not unlocked intentionally. 1 cost, place a card from your exhaust pile into your hand, exhaust this card, exhaust Exhume. And you also can't cycle back to an Exhume, so you can't infinitely exhaust Exhumes because when it's upgraded it costs 0. This is terrible for speedrunning. This is absolutely awful. Ban it, get rid of it, bin it. It is a 5.5. It is that bad. It is at the bottom. Feed. 1 cost, deal 10 damage if this kills a non-minion enemy. So minion enemies are certain bosses and elites will have smaller enemies with a little skull icon underneath them. That means they're a minion. That means that this won't work on them and means that they're like a sub-minion for a boss. This is the only card I believe that interacts with the minion effect. But I could be wrong. I could be mistaken. I'm not sure. Either way, if this kills a non-minion enemy, gain 3 permanent max HP. And it exhausts when you play it, so you only get 1 chance for it to activate. You can't Exhume. The upgraded Feed deals 12 damage and gains 4 permanent max HP. So whilst I think Feed is a very good card, when it's upgraded it deals 12 damage for 1 energy. That's pretty good value. And you get the potential for gaining max HP, which is insane. The thought process that it requires to use this, like the additional thinking of going, oh, I need to play this and then play Feed and hit that thing and gain the HP, eats up too much time for it to be generally very good. Therefore, you generally don't take it. But the max HP gain that you could get from it keeps you safe when your deck isn't perfect. So for a speed run, for a random seed race against someone, Feed is okay because if you gain, I don't know, if you trigger this twice in a run, it's better than Strawberry, right? If you trigger this 4 times, okay, prepare yourselves for what I'm about to say. If you trigger this 4 times in a run, it is literally better than Mango. It has gained 16 permanent max HP. Mango gives you 14. And if you trigger it 3 times, it's better than Pear. So you get the idea that it is, like, that effect is no small thing, gaining permanent max HP. It's not better than Mango in terms of it's the spirit, but in terms of the health gain, it's literally better than Mango. Statistically better than Mango. So yeah, it's a good card, but just not for speedrunning because it adds thought in. So for normal speedrunning, it's like a 3.5 because it does deal reasonable damage. But when you have to take a bit more time because you don't have a whirlwind, you don't have everything else, it adds value. I'd say it's like a 2 when you're unseeded, when you're racing someone on a seed. So it's got its place, but it's just not good enough for whirlwindy games. Fiendfire, 2 cost, exhaust your hand, deal 7 damage for each exhausted card. It also gets exhausted at the end of that once it's played. Upgraded deals 10 damage for each card. This is a polarizing card because the animation is fucking slow. If you have Charon's Ashes, yeah, you'll deal a bit more damage, but you also take 7 years to watch all the cards go as they exhaust, and then the enemies get hit for 3 damage. That being said, early on, this is a really high burst card. You know, you manage to get a turn where you draw, 7 cards, and you play this, and you deal 60 damage to whatever enemy you want. That's really good. The disappointing thing, or the dangerous thing, is that you may exhaust like your only ways of winning. This is one of the most hilarious ways to lose. Is if you Fiendfire and want to die because you've exhausted all of your attacks, you can only block, or you can't play any cards because you have no cards. But it's a reasonable finisher. It's a bit slow. I don't really like it in terms of picking it, but it's not terrible. It's not terrible as long as you use it correctly, rather than exhausting all your cards that you need. Exhaust the cards you don't need. and you'll have some fun with it, and deal a lot of damage whilst you do so. Like, you exhaust 2 cards with this, and you're dealing 20 damage for 2, that's okay. 3 is 30, that's like bludgeon territory almost. 4 is 40, I know this is just doing simple maths, but 40 damage is almost upgraded bludgeon, and more than that, and you're like punching something really hard. So that's insane. Oh, and it ticks, and the damage goes up, it scales well with strength. So if you have lots of strength, the damage increases for each time it ticks. So that's kind of cool, that's a cool interaction. But I would rate it as like a 2.5. It's good, but it's not great. It's like, yeah, if you get it, you're not disappointed, but you need to think when you play it, so maybe that even pulls it down to a 3. I don't know, it's like 2.5. We'll put it there. That's a reasonable place for it to be. Immolate. The old version of Immolate is terrible. It used to say, exhaust a card. I think it cost 1? What did it even cost? It cost 1, I think. It said, exhaust a card if it's a curse or a status effect, like one of these status cards. Then it deals 10 damage to all enemies. This Immolate is really fucking good, and I've not played around with it enough to really understand whether or not it's worth taking. So it's 2 cost, deal 21 damage to all enemies. That's better than Whirlwind damage. Add a burn to your discard pile. So it goes into a discard pile, so you might not see it the next turn. It might take 2 turns to come up. Upgraded deals 28 damage to all enemies. That's really good. It scales worse with strength, but it's a big AoE. Although I don't play with this, I would peg this as like a 1.5. It's not essential. It's not a Whirlwind essential level. It's not Flex essential level. But it's a huge AoE against all enemies. Maybe it's even a 1, actually. I wouldn't even mind if I had this in a Whirlwind deck, because I'd then draw the Whirlwind later, and I'd draw this on different turns, maybe. I think it's really fucking good. This is an insane card. One of the cards I wish I could speedrun with, but it's just not. It's not unlocked. It doesn't exist. It's the old version. So yeah, really, really nutso card. In fact, I should check when this was changed, because I might be playing on a patch. No, I think there was no patch where the Pandora's glitch exists and this existed. I don't know. Not important. This is a nutso card. Yeah, this is crazy. Yeah, exactly, Fur. But it does also add the burn. Got to consider that one in. But it's still crazy. Like a 1.5 tier. Impervious. Gain block. It's a 5. Juggernaut. Whenever you gain block, it costs 2 energy. It does nothing. It's a 5. Limit Break. Okay, here's something that's actually worth reviewing. Limit Break. 1 cost, double your strength, and exhaust. God, I keep clicking off. Exhaust. When it's upgraded, it no longer exhausts. So this is a situational strength gain card, which is, not great. Sorry, not great. It's a strength gain card. It doubles it. It's obviously recursive if you have multiple. If you have multiple and flexes and you get lucky and you draw them all, this is obviously nuts. If you have baseline strength due to things like Vajra or Girya, or Red Skull even, this can go absolutely apeshit. But it's situational. So if you have no strength and you have no flexes, this is a painfully bad card to draw. It's so variable that if you have the strength and you play this, you suddenly kill everything ever, always in one turn. If you don't have it, it's a curse. It's like having a curse and adding it to your deck. Because it's even worse than a defend at that point. So I'd say this is like a 1.5 to a 2. Because it is really good when it goes off, but it's so situational in that regard. Like, more situational than Spot Weakness, which gains you strength. Obviously, this can gain you a ridiculous amount of strength, and it's one of the most fun cards in the game for that purpose. You suddenly start dealing whirlwinds that deal like 90 damage per tick or something, and tick for 8 ticks, and all of a sudden everyone dies. But it's situational. I am very polarized on my opinion about it. I don't know if I think it's good or not. It's really variable. That's kind of one of the annoying things about it. So I think it's really good, but not as essential as the other cards that you would speedrun with. But worth trying with for sure, because it can give you some crazy runs. Offering, the second best card alongside Whirlwind. So Offering, 0 cost, lose 4 HP, who cares? Gain 2 energy, yes please. Draw 3 cards, yes please. Exhaust, fine. Upgraded, draws 5 cards. This is so good. It's the all-in-one card. The 4 HP you lose is almost always offset by the fact that you kill something additional to what you would have without drawing the cards and gaining the energy. So if you take 4 damage and you gain 2 energy, you draw a 2-cost attack that does 15 damage, and you kill something that was going to hit you for more than 4 damage, you've healed yourself by playing Offering. But you've also drawn loads of other cards, you can do more stuff, it's so flexible, it works so well with Whirlwind because it gains energy, and it draws cards, so you're more likely to have a turn where you get like 5 flexes and a Whirlwind, and then you kill everything. It's just the bread and butter it's the spine of the deck alongside Whirlwind. Yeah, it's like if Whirlwind's the spine of the book, this is like the front and back cover. It makes everything work so well. And then flexes the pages. So you've got, yeah, it's tier 1 for sure, no question. Reaper, final card for the Ironclad. Deal 5 damage to all enemies, heal for unblocked damage dealt, so if it hits shields, you don't heal for it. And it costs 2, and it gets exhausted when you play it. Unupgraded, it only deals 4 damage to all enemies. So it's a very minor bump in damage when you upgrade it. Obviously, if you scale this with strength, it becomes like a really crazy heal. You whack everyone and you deal like 15 damage to 3 enemies, and all of a sudden your health bar goes from nearly dead to nearly full. But that's not a realistic expectation, nor is it something that is worth doing in speedrunning. So this is a bad card, because the damage you deal, even though it's all enemies, the damage you deal per energy is so low that it's not worth running. But it's a cool card. It's a very nice card. If you make it work, God, you're going to have so much fun and you're going to survive anything. But it is just bad for speedrunning. So, yeah, we look at that, we say whatever, don't want it. Cool, so that's the Ironclad's cards, all reviewed.